Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, today marks the 125th anniversary of the Wounded Knee Massacre. Now, this was the last major confrontation in the long war between the United States and the Native American tribes from the Great Plains. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to be playing an excerpt from our interview with Russell Means, where he remembers the Wounded Knee Massacre, and he also describes the United States, the entirety of the United States, being a present-day reservation. Now, David Knight joins me to break down this. Give us your interpretation of what Russell Means is talking about with the U.S. being a reservation, as well as a little bit of historical background.
Thank you, Leanne. Yeah, I couldn't agree with Russell Means more because, yes, America truly is a reservation. He wrote a book called Where White Men Fear to Tread. And in that book, he said, the American government has broken every treaty it's ever made with the Indians. He said, white man, your treaty with the government is your Constitution, your Bill of Rights, and they're destroying that right now. We need to learn some lessons from Wounded Knee. This is not simply a contest between the white man and the red man. No, this tells us something about the very nature of the government we live under today. It hasn't really changed, even though this is 125 years later. So we look at this, Leanne, and many people look at this and say, well, this is a race war against Native Americans. This was revenge of the 7th Cavalry. This was genocide. No, it really was democide, and that's what we really need to understand. Let's get a little bit of history here. Everybody's familiar with General Custer and his last stand, okay, the Battle of Little Bighorn. That had taken place 14 years earlier. It was the 7th Cavalry. That cavalry was the same one that was part of this massacre at Wounded Knee. So they were closer to that massacre at Little Bighorn 14 years away than we are to 9/11. And I found it very interesting that even though that had happened, even though they'd been at war with the Indians, they still had Indians on this reservation that had firearms. And that's one of the key things about this when it broke out. Now, they'd been on the reservation for quite some time, and we'll talk about the parallels between the reservation and our welfare system. Just as I mentioned, the parallels between the treaties that our government made in the Constitution. We'll also talk about what they did to the Indians in terms of education, how they tried to completely and utterly destroy their culture using an educational establishment. Does that sound familiar? But let's talk about the events itself. What was happening on that day 125 years ago? They were having a ghost dance. It was a ceremony. It was a religious ceremony, kind of a mystic thing that was going on. But also at the same time, the 7th Cavalry came up in a very provocative way, the same way that we see happen often when there are protests, right. Whether it's Ferguson and other places. The police will come or the government will come in a very provocative way to try to provoke an incident. And that's what they did in this particular situation. Said, you're going to have to stop this. You need to disband. We're going to move you off of this reservation and give us your guns. Now, there was one particular individual named Black Coyote. He was a deaf Indian. And he said, I don't want to give you my gun. I paid a lot of money for this gun. There was a struggle that ensued. There was a gunshot that was fired. Not clear who fired the first shot. But after that, it was on. And it was an all-out massacre. They used cannon fire against the Indians that were there. But let me read you some of the eyewitness accounts from an investigation from the Department of the Interior. Actually, it was the Commission of Indian Affairs at the time, 1 year later. And this is what they said. They said, right near the flag of truce, a mother was shot down with her infant. The child, not knowing its mother was dead, was still nursing. An especially sad sight. The women, as they were fleeing with their babies, were killed together, shot right through. Women who were pregnant were also killed. A woman who survived lost her daughter and baby boy. According to her account, one shot passed through the baby's body, hit her elbow, causing him to drop to the ground. She was also hit twice in the back. Now, when I looked at this, what this reminded me of was what happened with the FBI at Ruby Ridge back in the 90s, okay? What did we have there? We had an FBI sniper, Lon Horiuchi, who clearly at point blank range for a sniper knew that he was shooting straight in the head a mother holding her baby, armed with nothing but a baby. And what happened to Lon Horiuchi? Well, he was given a medal. And we have the people who were involved in this massacre. 300 Indians died that were there. They were later buried in a mass grave. Their bodies were stripped naked and they were thrown into a pit. The same types of democides that we see being done, whether it's by the Turkish government against the Armenians, whether it's by the Nazis against the Jews and other people that they oppressed, or whether it's the American government against its own people. And what they did was they gave out, there were 25 U.S. Army soldiers who were killed. 20 members who survived were given medals of honor by the Army. It's their highest award. Same thing they did with Juan Horiuchi, right? And as a result of this, there have been movements by the Indian people to try to get these medals revoked. 125 years later, the people who got these medals are long gone. But the government will not take those medals away. That is the most amazing thing to me, is that they won't take these medals away. They won't admit that they did anything wrong. Right. And of course, you know, when we look at the reservation system, you mentioned Russell Means, and we're going to play a long segment from Russell Means because we went out and Rob Dew and others were able to interview Russell Means before he died. And there was a very famous incident, Wounded Knee in 1973. Russell Means and others of the American Indian movement occupied that because it is a very important symbolic incident, both for the American government as well as for the Indians. The American government essentially was declaring victory in its war against the Indians. It was the last battle that occurred between the U.S. government and the American Indians. And I think when we look at this, we need to understand that the government wants to continually divide us into white, black, red, so that we fight against each other. But they use the same tactics against all of us.
Right.
They use the same tactics against all of us, whether we're white or black today, that they were using against the Indians in the 1800s. And when we look at this, it was not only the broken treaties, but it was a reservation system, which closely parallels the welfare plantation that they have created in America today. And that's what they did. They sealed them off. They took away their ability to earn a living. They keep very tight controls on them. There's a great deal of corruption with the Indian Bureau that's been well documented. Of course, there's been a couple of films talking about what happened with the American Indian movement, Leonard Peltier and Russell Means. There was a director, Michael Apted, who did 2 films. One of them was documentary, Incident at Oglala. The other one is a fictional dramatization loosely based on those incidents called Thunderheart, stars Val Kilmer. So there's a parallel in that, but I think the key thing that we need to, in the little bit of time that we've got left, the key thing we need to talk about is, I think, the most important thing, and not only the welfare state and confining people, shutting down all avenues that allow them to be human, you know, confining where they can live, confining what they can do, constricting their movement. We're going to see control of transportation. But here's how you really destroy a culture, how you really destroy people. And this is what they did to the Indians. They took away, once they got them confined on the reservations, they took away their children. Right. They shipped them back east to boarding schools to completely put them into
annihilate them.
Exactly. Annihilate their culture and educate them into a different system. And that's why the government wants to run your educational system. And if you don't want that to happen to your people, your family, your culture, your country, get your kids out of the government school. Put them in a private school, homeschool them, do something, but take control of their education. If you don't, they will take them away from you. They will take your country away from you. They will take your liberty away from you. That's the fundamental point. This reservation system, destroying and lying to everyone about this, it's not an issue of white versus red. It's an issue of democide.
Absolutely. And we are still seeing that. We're seeing children who are being raised in this socialized school system who are now actively trying to get rid of the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. They have no historical understanding, and it's just like you said, it's cultural annihilation, and people don't get it. They don't understand why America is fundamentally being transformed, and perhaps they don't want to hear it from you, a white man. How dare you? You
know, Bill Ayers, it was far more dangerous once he got involved in education than he was when he was bombing buildings with the Weather Underground.
Right.
Okay, and it's far more dangerous to have a Muslim group come into this country and set up schools that are going to proselytize and kids for Turkey or whatever, okay? It's far more dangerous for them to do that than to strap bombs on their bodies and blow people up at shopping centers. We have to understand where the real danger is coming from, and that's how you destroy a country from within. Every dictator, every would-be dictator understands that. Give me your kids at an early age, and I will change your entire culture.
My goodness. Well, this is going to be very important, and I know we'll be speaking about this more, so stick around, because after the break, we're going to be playing our interview with Russell Means and remembering the Wounded Knee Massacre.
Well, we're here at Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Sioux Indian Reservation, also known as Prisoner of War Camp 44. And here's the mass grave of the people who were massacred here at Wounded Knee in 1890. The massacre, of course, is well known among all American Indian people, especially of the United States of America, as the signature event of Indian history with the government of the United States. So then we had to come into the reservations. We were starved into it. Literally starved into it. But when we came in with pride and dignity. Even though we had been logistically defeated rather than militarily defeated, we became dependent because our food source was gone on handouts from the federal government, starvation rations. And so they herded us up, and the 7th Cavalry, which had been defeated in 1876, at Custer's sensitivity training session, the United States and its military forces hold immense grudges. You said what happened at Fallujah. They started assassinating the leadership, first Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, the last to come in to the reservations and give up their arms. Well, there was a Indian leader who was euphemistically called Bigfoot in English. He had his people. Well, the leaders were being, to his mind, systematically assassinated. He headed south with his band of people to come to Pine Ridge and come under the protection of Red Cloud, another leader. He was stopped. They had no weapons, because on the reservation, they took away your weapons. It's just like going to prison. They take away your weapons. They were stopped right up here on top of the hill from my ranch. And there's a sign up there on the way to Wounded Knee. The day before Christmas, they were brought down here. They were brought in from over those hills there, and they were camped along. This was a creek then. It's all dried up now, but they put a Hotchkiss gun up there on that hill. You know, the Hotchkiss guns fired rounds about like a .50 caliber. They put them up on the hills over there and up over here. See, then there were no trees, just brush. And they put a Hotchkiss gun right here. And when the order came, they massacred men, women, and children, over 300. Then after they mowed most of them down, then the cavalry rode in with their sabers and their pistols, finished the job of the women and children and old people down in those ravines and down by the creek. And it was indiscriminate. They used sabers on babies and women. They loved to come along and hack. It was pretty gruesome. Their story, and the Army has to claim this, otherwise they're liable. We're the people who defeated militarily the United States of America, who had built up a string of forts through 3 states. And we burnt every one of those. He gave them up because we militarily defeated him. Now we're in this bowl, Wounded Knee Bowl, surrounded by the armed might of the United States of America, and we're going to pull out one gun with our women and children and fire a shot. That's what they claim. And people believe it because we're Indians and we don't have a brain. Unlike Americans who have brains but don't use them. They slaughter us, men, women, and children. And then the blizzard hits, and they bury, after the blizzard goes by, all the bodies are frozen. And that infamous picture of Chief Bigfoot frozen in a horrible way, his body. Then they stack us up. This is before the Nazis and the concentration camps. They stack them up, all our bodies along by this mass grave, and they all take pictures. And then, of course, we got the eyewitness stories in detail from the survivors. Bigfoot, ironically, was running to keep his people safe from the cavalry, and they were all killed instead. This ground is consecrated with our blood. This land now filled with Indians that are absolutely dependent on the government for everything. For everything! At any rate, you depend on the government, and what you'll end up with is poverty and a lot of paper. Because everything you do, the government requires a lot of paper. You have to fill out a lot of forms. Then they have to fill out a lot of forms. And then they go up to the next level of government, they got to fill out a lot of forms. And by the time it gets to where it's supposed to go, nothing happens. We have government health here. Our life expectancy, if you don't count AIDS, is the lowest in the world. Here. We are worse off than people in Haiti. No, you don't want the government taking care of you. I do not speak untruths. It's a never-ending cycle of poverty, dependency on the government. And in order for you to get ahead, you have to be like a congressman. You have to take bribes. You have to steal money. Taxpayers' money. So America is no different than this Indian reservation. You're dependent on the government now, and you're getting what you deserve. But every time you try to get away from the government, they'll kill you. Or put you in prison. Or let you become an American. If you catch my drift. Because you're the new Indian. You're the new American Indian. Congratulations. Welcome to the club. But this land is beautiful. It belongs to us. And we should learn to take care of it by fighting for her. She's worth it. And so are we.
Shane Steiner's involvement with InfowarsLife.com truly happened in an organic way. I went to high school with Shane. His brother knew his parents well, and he was visiting the office once, hadn't been to the office in years, and said, "Wow, I noticed you're making and selling supplements. Do these really work? Because I've tried a lot of supplements as a workout enthusiast, and I really think most of them are hype." And I said, "Here, take some home, try it." Well, a few weeks later, he came in blown away and said, "I want to buy 3 boxes of this stuff to give my friends and family. It's simply amazing." He said, "Why does it work so well?" And I said, "Listen, go to InfowarsLife.com, watch the informational videos with Dr. Group and others. They understand how it all works. I know that it works for me. That's all I understand. The science, the facts, the research, people's testimonials, they're all on InfowarsLife.com. You can check it out for yourself."
I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to push myself and work out harder, and that led to me being able to come out and do stuff like the barefooting and the surfing and stuff like that, which I've never done. I never would have done that 2 years ago.
Shane has said over and over again, more than just libido and energy, it made him want to get into the gym more. It made him want to get in better shape. And believe me, the Steiners have amazing genetics. His brother is a world champion steer wrestler. His dad, Bobby Steiner, is a famous world champion bull rider. They've got natural genetics. But when you added this to the mix, in Shane's own words, it took him to the next level. Shane noticed the mental clarity. Bobby was able to work out longer and gain muscle mass. He's already completely shredded. I gotta admit, for me, the biggest effect has been libido. Now, I've never claimed to have a body like some beach model, but back when I was 20, 22 years old and worked out every day, I looked great. But over the years, and being married, having 3 kids, and working 18 hours a day, I gained basically 100 pounds. And it's been a long process losing that weight in the last 4 years. But if you look at the photos and the videos of what I looked like 4 or 5 years ago versus today, the results are dramatic. I'd already cleaned up my diet, I was working out hard, but I'd only lost about 20 pounds. It was adding the other key ingredients from InfowarsLife.com that helped me personally go to the next level and shed another 35 pounds.
This has actually made me feel so good that here lately, about a year ago, I started training jiu-jitsu, and that kind of led to doing some boxing and kickboxing. I mean, it's amazing that 2 years ago, I was on the couch and couldn't even tie my shoes, and now I'm training with MMA fighters and just doing stuff that I never thought that I would be doing ever again. So Super Male Vitality has allowed me to do some amazing things, and if it has those kind of effects for me, I know that it will do great things for you. So just try Super Male Vitality. I promise you, you'll love it.
And finally, let's look at Anthony Gucciardi, Infowars.com reporter. He also works with Dr. Group and others, helping develop the newest, most cutting-edge, high-quality supplements. Let's take a look at what happened when he tried to barefoot ski for the first time with the Steiners. And remember, we're not making fun of him. He had the will to get in the arena, and he's lost more than 10 pounds in the last few years of fat and gained more than 10 pounds of muscle. And Anthony chalks it up to Super Male Vitality as well. Bottom line, folks, you want to discover the power of Super Male Vitality and Super Female Vitality for yourself by visiting InfowarsLife.com today or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.